it is an Orwellian time, when peace is war and war is peace. And obviously we are on the wrong side of the media presentation. And so I'm also cancelled, even in my own country.
Welcome back to the channel. Today I have another very special guest, someone who is not afraid to stand up to the most powerful players on the global stage, Professor Biljana Vankovska. Now, if you don't know her yet, trust me, by the end of this conversation you will see why her insights are not just valuable, they are absolutely necessary if you want to understand what's really going on. Biljana is a professor of international relations and she's lived through some of the most turbulent times in the Balkans. From her candidacy for the presidency in North Macedonia to her work with the Nordic peace community during the NATO interventions in Yugoslavia, she brings a perspective that challenges the status quo at every turn. But this isn't just an academic exercise. Biljana's work shines a harsh spotlight on the hypocrisy of Western powers. She reminds us that NATO's actions often prioritize Western strategic interests, actually that means American strategic interests, over the actual well-being of people. And if we're honest, isn't that exactly what we see unfolding in Ukraine today? Long-range missiles, landmines and billions in military aid. Does that sound like a recipe for peace? Or is it just fueling a war that could completely spiral out of control? And then there's the media, one of my favorite topics. We are bombarded with narratives that paint complex conflicts in black and white, good versus evil, democracy versus tyranny. Whether it's the war on Gaza or the Ukraine crisis, Biljana breaks down how the media dehumanizes certain populations, Palestinians in particular, while glorifying others. It's a manufactured type of consent that silences dissent and keeps us from asking the really hard questions. Why are we funding endless wars just to keep a dying empire on life support? Take the petrodollar for example. The process of de-dollarization, which accelerates with increasing momentum, could fundamentally weaken US hegemony. And let's be honest, isn't it about time that we questioned who really benefits from that hegemony? Of course, we couldn't have this conversation without discussing the tragedy unfolding in Gaza. Biljana calls out the blatant double standards we see every day, but it's not just about the actions on the ground, it's the way the media spins the story to make sure the perpetrators stay blameless. This interview isn't just about dissecting the problems. It's about understanding what's at stake and imagining what could be different. And as always, don't take our word for it, question everything, especially your own assumptions. One last thing. Critical voices like the ones you hear on this channel are being actively silenced and suppressed. You will hear Biljana mention this herself in the interview. You may not notice it, you may not know it, you may not even believe it, but it does happen. And I have the statistics to prove it. So if you do value sharp, unfiltered analysis that doesn't follow the mainstream narrative, hit the subscribe button, like and share. It really makes a difference. And for those who really want to keep up with my work, make sure you join me on Substack. No restricting algorithmic filters there, or you can listen on my podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Amazon. The links are in the description below. Thank you. And here we go. Biljana Vankovska, how are you?
Very well, thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. I have a list of your achievements next to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's that long, yeah? So you are professor of international relations and peace studies. You were or you are on the Institute for Security, Defense and Peace and the Faculty of Philosophy and Methodius
Saint Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje.
in Skopje. Yeah, you did
Actually,
research.
that is the same institution. I teach at the Faculty of Philosophy, Saint Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje. It is international relations, international security, peace studies, and political science. And since recently, I'm head of a Global Changes Center, which is a separate research unit of the same faculty and same university.
I have more here, yeah. So, research interest, international security, peace and conflict analysis, civil-military relations, transitional justice, Balkan affairs. And then we have a couple of academic roles, guest senior research fellow at the Copenhagen Peace Research Institute, faculty member at the European Peace University in Austria, of all places, senior fellow at the Geneva Center for Democratic Control of Armed Forces, etc., etc. Then editorial positions, editorial-in-chief of Security Dialogues, if I see this correctly, and
Yes.
editorial board member of journals such as Journal of Balkan and Near East Studies and Journal of International Relations and Development. Do you ever sleep?
It's not a problem for workaholics, you know. We love our job. And unfortunately, the field I'm working in, as we all know, is so dramatic, so
Yeah.
important. It goes day by day. So there is no time to say, okay, now I get some time out. I just relax and live my personal life. So one really should be updated hour by hour, and then either I teach to my students or talk to the public. I have to be informed.
And if all of this would not be enough already, you have written a couple of books, I'm not entirely sure how many, and you have published over 100 scientific articles and chapters in multiple languages. And not to mention, you're a presidential candidate in the North Macedonian 2024 election. Hallelujah!
Hallelujah. Yeah. That was probably the most adventurous thing I did this year at the end of my long career. And somehow I thought that the political party that nominated me, the left, which is a minor political party somewhere on the margins, although they are growing in their political influence, let's say, in the Macedonian society. But somehow I thought that they need me and that I should sacrifice my personal satisfaction and relaxation for the sake of a greater good. And I don't hide that I'm a leftist. So we found ourselves on the same line.
Yes, and we came into contact via Jan Oberg. So I interviewed him. His interview is not yet published. I will do soon. Yeah. So how do you know each other?
Oh, that's a long friendship and professional cooperation. Although since recently I became formally board member of the Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research, Jan Oberg's foundation. But we met just on the eve of NATO intervention in Yugoslavia. It was in 1998, I believe. When he visited for the first time my university, he gave a lecture to the students of the peace study program. That was a relatively new program and a unique one because at that time Yugoslavia was still, engulfed in all kind of intra-ethnic conflicts or international conflicts, international interventionism. So that was a very dramatic time, and we at Skopje University believe that peace studies is very important, and Macedonia had the luck to be spared of all the war horrors. We got independence in a peaceful way, so there was no war on our territory. So while the things were ongoing elsewhere all around us, we believed that we should start learning and teaching about peace approach to resolution of conflict. And Jan Oberg, Johan Galtung, Håkan Wiberg, the trio of the Nordic peace community actually were the main teachers to us. And they were our dear friends and guests. So yes, I met Jan Oberg in Skopje. And ever since we have been working together on various projects, even communicating each other, just to test if each of us has a sound mind, because many crazy things were happening. And I remember the morning when the NATO intervention began, he called me on the phone and he said, "Is this possible? How is it possible that we have this military intervention?" So yes, we have gone through many dramatic moments, and I'm afraid we're still going through such times.
We definitely are, and it's quite frightening that peace researchers as Jan Oberg get deplatformed from various social media, like YouTube, for example. They deplatformed him. A peace researcher. I mean, what does that tell us about what's ahead?
It is an Orwellian time, when peace is war and war is peace, and obviously we are on the wrong side of the media presentation, and so I'm also cancelled even in my own country. I was just for a little while present on the media during the campaign, during the presidential campaign. And that was my short, limited time where I could speak pro-peace, anti-NATO. My agenda provided Macedonia leaving NATO alliance. We are members since 2020. Turning to the whole wild world, the multipolarity and all these things. So it is not a popular topic. For example, yesterday, the latest news in Macedonia and great joy is that one of our politicians, a female politician, became a deputy secretary general of NATO. So there is euphoria, like that is some kind of achievement,
Amazing.
I don't really feel happy about that, because I don't really have a good opinion about NATO and what it has done in the previous period.
I'm saying amazing. It's a coincidence because the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, where I am, Mark
Exactly.
Rutte, is now
Exactly.
Secretary General of NATO. Now, for people who may be less informed about this whole topic, this basically is a token of gratitude by the US to the Netherlands for being their poodle over the last, I don't know how many years, right?
And the same applies to Macedonia, because Macedonia was also very obedient, let's say, candidate for membership. And the craziest thing that the government did, actually, where Radmila Shekerinska, the current deputy secretary general, comes from, that party, exchanged the constitutional name of Republic of Macedonia into North Macedonia for the sake of joining NATO. So this is a reward for doing the right thing.
The right
Although
thing. Yeah.
yeah, the right thing, correctly. We understand each other. So the price that was paid, maybe in symbolic terms, but still it was really high. And the population is deeply divided. So Radmila Shekerinska leaves behind herself a deeply divided society with a lot of internal conflicts and polarization, but she has reached a top position in NATO. NATO that is on the brink of a third world war, I would say. Not
This,
very.
I mean,
I,
today
I don't
is,
envy her.
no, today is November the 24th of 2024. We have about, what, 2 months left of the Biden administration, and I've spoken with a number of subject matter experts who told me almost in the same words, these next 2 months are probably the most dangerous months we had in probably since the Second World War, because the powers behind a senile Joe Biden have decided to create a situation that is, to create a situation, I should be more specific, in Ukraine, also between the proxy war between the US and Russia, that Trump cannot reverse. And the first step that we just saw was the admission of, also the approval of the US for Ukraine to use long-range US weapons to be shot deep into Russia, which already has taken place. Now the conflicting reports how many rockets were already fired, but it already has
I
taken
think
place.
6.
Six.
It was yesterday was 6, and
Yeah.
now I'm not sure. But in the meantime, they also used UK weapons.
Yeah, long
So
range.
yeah,
Long range, yeah.
yeah.
And Russia has pulled his ambassador from Washington, I heard. You know, Putin and Lavrov are in no uncertain terms that they feel this is a direct attack from NATO on their territory. Yeah. So, I mean, we're going now, before we come to the Middle East, yeah, we're going now a little bit in that direction. Yeah. So what's your view?
Oh, you know, the funny situation is that I just got back from the Valdai Club conference that is usually held in Sochi in Russia. This one was held in early November. With intention for all of us to be there while the US elections, are at the end, so we could discuss all global affairs, including the results of the US elections. For me, it was the first visit to Russia ever, and the first, of course, to the Valdai Club. And I took part at the panel devoted to the Ukraine crisis, peace and war, and how to achieve some kind of exit strategy from the disaster that is ongoing for 1,000 days, if I'm not wrong, and more actually today. And I provoked some kind of unrest in the audience by keeping a pro-peace attitude, position. So in my view, in short, I'm just summing up my presentation. I said even the bad ceasefire agreement or some kind of truce or whatever, what would stop the ongoing violence and provide atmosphere for a long-term negotiations is better than the best war or the most successful war. Not many people were happy to hear that, and I found myself lonely if it was not for the Chinese colleague who also joined this position. So we were the two people on that panel sticking strongly to a peace solution. And you know, I felt that there are people who believe in military victory. On the Russian side, of course, because there were not Ukrainians present at that event. But what we hear from Mr. Zelensky and the other representatives of the Ukrainian government, they also speak in the same terms: final victory, total victory. And one wonders, how would that victory look like? And my final comment was, are we seeking some kind of Pyrrhic victory? That everything is destroyed and we should like build up the societies from the ashes, from the total destruction, or we should stop at some point. And you know, as soon as I got back, of course, I got some also positive reactions afterwards, and people from so-called global majority, they were approaching me later on to congratulate me for the courage to say such and to expose such plan. But then when I got home and this new escalation started about Biden's providing not only these long-range missiles, but also additional military support and use of landmines that are forbidden by the international law. So it is a range of measures that obviously this still current president of the United States is using. And the question is why? And then I also ask myself, is it rational to propose to Russians and to Mr. Putin to think about peace negotiations when the other side is obviously moving further to further escalation? So for tango and for peace dialogue, we need at least two sides. At this moment, I am concerned as any normal person on the world. I believe that we speak on behalf of many people who are concerned and who don't believe in positive military victory outcome. But here I would just like to add one opinion that I read with at the Facebook post of a friend of mine who is a professor in the United States, and he rightly so commented that Biden is not the key person. He's not even aware, or he's not a decision maker. He's a lame duck president, as we know. So who is behind? Okay, we know the military-industrial complex that still wants to go on with the war. But also this person, this friend of mine, he mentioned NATO. NATO has a reason to exist. Reason that there is more war and more war and more war. So they would not like to face another failure and defeat like in Afghanistan. We still remember these scenes that we saw from the airport and elsewhere in Kabul. So that was a disaster for NATO. NATO did not leave behind any positive legacy, including the one in the Balkans. So they are still trying to prove that they are necessary, they're needed, and they can, I don't know, help protect the Western world. So there is this lobby that is pro-war, obviously.
I think NATO was not in Afghanistan. The US was in Afghanistan. I'm not sure if NATO was in Afghanistan.
There were NATO soldiers, especially from the German contingent, and some others, including Macedonian soldiers were there. So yeah, they had a separate mission. Not exactly the same like the US one had, but they were all together there. And if United States as a key NATO member makes some things, that affects everybody else.
Virtually just before this interview, I interviewed Hala Rarit. She is a top diplomat, and she left as a diplomat in protest over Biden's administration's policies vis-a-vis Gaza. And with her, I discussed the same topic, because you said why. So there are multiple subject matter experts that I have spoken to who say that right now, between those till the new administration, the new Trump administration comes in now, are the most dangerous couple of months that we have since the Second World War. Why? Because the current administration, and I say specifically not Biden, because Biden is an empty shell. Anyone with the eye to see can see this. This is a mentally incapacitated empty shell. But the powers behind him, they have a vested interest in creating a situation, and I'm talking now specifically about the situation in Ukraine, that the new incumbent President Trump cannot reverse. And in this context, we have to see the long-range missiles that were just delivered, and other things that you already mentioned. The question is, how far would they really go? So, okay, NATO and of course the neocons, the neoconservatives in the US, they have a vested interest together with the military industrial. It almost sounds like a cliche already if you talk about the military industrial complex. You know, it's such an abstract thingy. Everybody has heard about it. Nobody really knows what it really means, right?
It
But
means Lockheed Martin and all these giant corporations that make profit out of war. Because
they go in and out
sadly,
of politics. They come into politics, go back into business, go into
absolutely,
politics.
absolutely. And one of the peace researchers I already mentioned, Håkan Wiberg, the former director of Copenhagen Peace Research Institute, he wrote an article, and usually he used to say, United States are addicted to war. They cannot survive as a state, a society without a war, having war every couple of years, because the military-industrial complex lives out of that. But then the story gets even more weird because Naomi Klein, in her Shock Doctrine, the famous book, she provided examples where
Naomi
U.S.
Klein, Naomi Klein, the shock
Naomi Klein,
doctrine. Yeah,
yes, she gave an exact examples
script.
where
Yeah.
U.S. Military companies are bombing, for example, I don't know, Iraq, and then they send reconstruction companies to build up the destroyed country. You know, it is really hard to grasp the logic behind that, but they were free to do so as long as the United States were all alone on the global scene as a key policeman and guardian of the world and the only superpower. Things have changed. And now when you ask me about these most critical 2 months before Donald Trump comes in office, it is, I think that our only hope is Mr. Putin and his policy of restraint, because they are obviously trying to provoke a harsh response from Moscow, and then to get even more arguments that they have to do more and they should maybe even send troops on the ground to really get engaged. Up to now, it's a proxy war. Actually, from the first moment, from February 2022, it was a proxy war. And it is something that I gave as a diagnosis, or maybe prognosis at that time, at the OSCE meeting of security institutes and university centers. And I was blacklisted immediately as somebody who cannot see that there is pure aggression over independent country, that Russia is the bad guy. But I had in mind, the prehistory, because every conflict has prehistory. We have to know the context of the whole picture, of the whole story, before we make any judgment who is good and who is bad guy in the story. So for me, it was clear that it was provoked. It was not unprovoked war. So Russia get into a sovereign country. I'm not happy about that move that Mr. Putin decided to make, honestly. But still, I could see the explanation why. And of course, people in the mainstream media or these power circles, they don't want that specific question, why? They want to describe the developments, the ground, and to label things good and bad. It's like a very simple story, to make complex stories simple. And Jan Oberk actually is the author of this acronym, KISS principle. KISS meaning keep it simple and stupid. So that the public is going to buy the story and the perceive the complex situation in a very simplistic terms. good guys, bad guys, one are only victims, the other are aggressors, and there is nothing else behind that. Unfortunately, the Ukraine war is one that is complex and is getting even more. Well, if we move to Gaza story, it is 1 century old story of injustice toward the Palestinians and the Arab population in that region.
It is true. Both September the 7th in Gaza and the invasion of Ukraine did not fall out of the blue sky.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So there are similarities. So if you talk about Ukraine, we could go at least back as 2014, where the US proven, interfered in a coup, not interfered, actually instigated a coup in Kiev. But also October the 7th, of course, did not fall out of the blue sky. And the UN General Secretary Guterres got almost lynched by the Israeli ambassador to the UN for saying so, right? Which is actually a good segue into the Middle East. And I see you wear a scarf,
Yes.
which might get you arrested if you would walk with it here in the Netherlands, in
Really?
Amsterdam, on the street. Yeah, yeah,
I knew
yeah.
this information, but I thought it was only for Germany. So I didn't know that it is forbidden in Netherlands too.
I filmed a little demonstration of maybe 5 or 6 people in front of my own house on the street here, and it took like 3 or 4 minutes, and the police was already there and grabbed them all.
Are you sure that I'm not making you a problem now wearing the
No, 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 no,
scarf?
no, 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 no.
Okay, I
Okay.
had I had the scarf, to be honest, even during my electoral campaign, because I believed that I'm not trying to become a president only of my small country, but as a politician, it is my duty, my moral duty, and as a human being and as a peace researcher, all at one, that I show solidarity with the Palestinian people. And I am wearing this even in my classroom. So it means that Macedonia is more democratic country still than Netherlands. I'm sorry to say.
Amazing. Yeah.
Amazing.
Now, as a behavior analyst, I'm really interested, of course, in media framing. Yeah, I just did a piece on that topic concerning the so-called Amsterdam pogrom, yeah, where
Mhm,
peaceful Israeli soccer fans were
mhm.
chased like in a pogrom, Jews chased in Amsterdam, the media headlines which went around the world, while in fact it was the other way around, where Israeli Maccabi hooligans in military formation, and we know from Israeli sources that Mossad agents were in these groups, and IDF soldiers, because basically everybody in this age is in the army in Israel, were ransacking Amsterdam. Yeah. But what was
Yeah.
interesting to see, of course, is the media reaction. So, in regards to the Middle East specifically, let's leave Ukraine at the side for now. Yeah. What's your experience, your analysis in terms of media representation, framing, manipulation? I don't want to say propaganda, because if you say propaganda, everybody thinks Nazi Goebbels, yeah?
Mhm.
Not realizing basically the Germans and Goebbels learned propaganda from the Americans, from a nephew of Sigmund Freud, Edward Bernays. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Anyway, what's your term? What's your view on?
See, I cannot escape from the fact that I'm coming from a small, almost unknown country in the middle of so-called Western Balkans. And here, I can tell you from this position, not as Biljana Vankovska, who is a public intellectual, also someone who wants to know more about the world, but as a Macedonian citizen, there are practically no news because on our TV news and TV debates or whatever is on the mainstream media, there is almost an obsession talking only about EU, 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 and now NATO, deputy secretary general, things like that. So this is, maybe I'm going to use an offensive word for some people, but it is a political closeness, in self-centeredness about things that bother only us. So it is a kind of autism, we don't care what is going to happen to the rest of the world, as long as we are going through European reforms, joining European Union, trying to please Brussels, and so on. So I'm not going to talk about the internal affairs in this small country, but as a human being, as a professor, as a public intellectual, I have been following the development, of course, not since 7th of October last year. So I know enough that these people actually suffered for so long that people, I mean, the general public in the world almost became indifferent. Like, okay, we know there is an open concentration camp in Gaza for years, for decades, but okay, they're peaceful. There are no dramas, no bloodshed in large scale. So 7th of October appeared as some event that the Western media actually tried to misuse as a beginning of something, or escalation of something deeply wrong and evil on the side of the Palestinians. They disregard everything evil that has been done to the Palestinian population for generations. And I'm wondering, if you have one generation by another, by, generation by generation, they all live in inhumane circumstances, how do you expect them to be nice, polite, or they want obedient robots that would just try to follow the Israeli orders? And maybe this is also radical that I'm going to say, but I believe that according to the international law, according to everything that concerns the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian land, the settlements, and everything that was done against the international law, these people have always had right to self-defense. They were trying, they were suffering, but now this situation is probably misused or abused by Netanyahu, not only for him to stay on power, because war makes him a hero, and now it's not time for democracy, for elections, for accountability, but let's stick together, rely around the flag, and we have this enemy that we have to defeat. And he also speaks in the same terms of total victory, total military victory. And I don't know what it means when you fight against a civilian population that mostly has no weapons at all. And we know the statistics of the victims. It's a very ugly word to say statistics. Of course, when we talk about human beings, children, elderly, women, but
70%, 70% of the victims,
70%. Yes, exactly.
women and children.
And they all have names, they all have faces, they all have or had lives that we should respect and remember in a way. But this is, as I said, one way is for Netanyahu to stay on power, because he was already charged for corruption deals and many other things. The Israelis were not happy with him on the top of the state. But now he is moving further to making probably a greater Israel, to totally clean up the Palestinian lands and to find a final solution of the ongoing problem. So interestingly, about a media presentation. Some days ago, I was trying to hear again and again the wise British journalist Robert Fisk, who wrote for Independent. He
Yeah,
was
but he
my
died. He died.
Yes, he
Yeah.
died 4 years ago, and I miss him badly. You know, in times like this, I know that he would have been there. He would have been the one who would talk about the names of the children, of the wounded people, about the medical staff, and all the horrors that are ongoing there. So I was following some of his video presentations that are still available on YouTube. And while I was listening to him talking some 10 years ago or 6 years ago, he was talking, his words were as if he witnessed this situation. So
Spot on.
nothing changed, except for us who are now more upset because of the higher scale of the victims, all the weaponry used, and even experiments made, because Israeli are now using American weapons. Of course, they get more and more military support by the ally from Washington. And that's why this new upheaval, and even in us who feel solidarity with the Palestinian people, sometimes there are moments when we think this is something new, only because of the scale. Otherwise, in essence, in the roots of the conflict, it is all the same. So I find even ourselves guilty to some degree that we disregarded this problem. Even we who care or try to follow international affairs, but then there is something ongoing in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or Sudan or Ukraine. So it is sometimes even impossible to be aware of everything that is going on. So we jump from one place to another. But the global picture is that this is the most disastrous moment of modern human history. I don't know, we cannot know how it looked like, I don't know, in Middle Ages or some other times in the past. But now when we have this high technology and possibilities to make life of the human population better, and the well-being, to increase the well-being, we are now seeing genocide, and it is a new normal. And that is of course results of the media presentation. Some countries like mine disregard the problem altogether, or they gave 5 seconds in the news, like there was some bombing somewhere and a few people died, and that's all. They don't go in the background of the story. They never invited an expert in the TV studio to talk about the totality of the problem. From what I can see in the western part of the world, that is, as we said, we are not going to call it propaganda, but it is a brainwashing. But that is day by day the same story, the same wording, and even, you know, people like us would not be welcome in their studios only because they show solidarity. And see the treatment actually of the special rapporteur on the Gaza situation,
Francesca.
how
Yeah.
Francesca, how they treat her,
Do
the
you know her?
media.
Do you know her?
Not personally,
Okay.
but I know personally Richard Falk, the professor from Princeton, who has a Jewish origin, and he used to be special rapporteur. I don't exactly remember now the time period, but he was under such horrible pressure, elderly professor from Princeton, very brave. He still works on Palestine on a daily basis, even he is 94 years old. And I know from his experience.
Richard Falk, F-A-L-K, huh?
F-A-L-K, yes.
Yeah.
So I know that he was pressed to leave the position after he submitted a report. He's one of the leading experts and professors of international law. So when he came with that result, with that report, he was an object of smearing campaign, of physical attacks to his life and everything. So whoever speaks the truth about the Gaza situation doesn't have an easy life. So I admire Francesca very much for what she's doing, and she's still trying. But I know who is listening to us. That is my point. How this voice is not us, maybe her or other more important people who have testimonies from the ground. And we watched actually the other day this British medical doctor who had a testimony in the British Parliament.
He was crying, yeah?
He was crying. He broke down. And that is something that can't leave you indifferent. You simply feel empathy in that moment, and you know that it takes such a courage to be there and to, despite the horror, to try to save lives. That is something that is really not adequate for 21st century, that we imagine as a century of advancements, of technological development, of I don't know what else we can. But this contrast is really something shocking. It's hard to put these two things together. Earlier this fall, I visited China twice. It was my two first visit to that part of the world. And when you're there, you have a perspective of a different world that is optimistic, that is positive, that is peace-oriented, that is preoccupied with development, infrastructure, building friendships. And then you get back to this part of the world that we call the West, because now I also belong to the West because of the NATO. And you find yourself in a horror. So you just wonder, how is it possible that these two words live simultaneously, one next to another? It's very hard to really reconcile these two perspectives of the world today.
At the moment, these worlds are still apart, but if we are not careful, those worlds might merge.
I know, and that's why actually I believe that in these two coming months, our destiny is much more in the hands of someone that I may not like as a politician and his moves so far and anything, but the politics of restraint, of not really getting into the trap of responding to the provocations. It is Moscow, it is Mr. Putin. So if he responds to these provocations, then I don't know if it will be possible to end that spiral of violence that will bring us to the end of times, probably.
It depends how far, I'm tempted to say Ukraine, but Ukraine will do whatever they can, Zelensky, but it depends how far the US will allow Ukraine to go. There's only so much that even with Putin's, let's say, in quotation, best intentions, he can only accept so much. I mean, Putin is not the most hawkish politician in Russia.
No,
People don't
no,
realize this.
no. It is what I realized during my short visit there, that I really met hawkish people. One of them has a book in which he writes that nuclear weapons are divine invention, that it is gift from God. And I just closed that book because I couldn't read further, because it just provoked physical reaction in my body. So there are people like that, and we should all be aware that hawkish circles exist everywhere, somewhere around the decision-making bodies. So it is even hard to grasp that we depend on whips of some people, or weaknesses or strength of some personalities. That is not supposed to be, because we need a system. We need rules, not rules-based order. I hate that phrase, but
It's anyway dying.
international
Yeah.
law. International law, as simple as it is written in the UN Charter. We need that. We need the structures. We need international structures. We need international public opinion. And I remember that we went so backwards since 2003. You probably also remember the big mass protest against the war in Iraq that was still not ongoing, but everything was ready for the war. So on the 15th of February 2003, the whole world was on the streets protesting and trying to prevent a war that we all knew that would be a catastrophe for the Iraqi people, for the region, and everything. Now we can't see mass protests. Now the
Because people
only,
are misinformed.
yeah, yeah, and
They don't
we
know
started with peace studies, and I can tell you that they are on a deathbed, that they're dying
everywhere. Everywhere.
everywhere, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah,
Before we move on, because you just said Iraq, I'm pretty sure you remember the almost iconic image from Colin Powell. Where was it? In the UN, or I think he was testifying in the UN with this
UN.
glass
Yes,
test tube
yes,
shaking.
yes.
Do you know what was in this glass tube?
I only know that he was lying. Colin Powell was lying in front of the members of the UN Security Council.
That was it. I interviewed his chief of staff, Colonel Larry Wilkerson, and he told me with a smile on his face, it was salt. Yeah,
Yes,
the iconic image.
it could have been sugar,
Yeah,
as far as we are concerned. But
yeah,
he, from his position, lied to the entire world
yeah.
public, and these people believed him to some degree. So he, everything that went unpunished, that United States of America did in the last this
After the
unipolar
Second World War, let's
moment,
say. Yeah, yeah,
and a unipolar moment, especially after the end of the Cold War.
yeah.
Everything was a violation of international law, and they went unpunished. No accountability, no moral judgment. And now when we see all these sanctions against Russia, we wonder why that was not implemented on this other
The other,
perpetrator.
the other, the other iconic moment that I remember was Madeleine Albright, where it wasn't CNN, it was a different news station, where she was asked if she found it justified that 500,000 Iraqi children were starved to death between the first and the
I
second
know.
Gulf War. And she said, yes, she found it justified. Without her instinctive reaction was, yes, it's justified. Yeah. Now imagine this happens to America.
Yes, yes, it is what we remember. I don't know about the younger generations, and we have to repeatedly give them these examples to know how people can be unscrupulous and brutal and merciless, actually, when they do what they have in their strategic mind, that we are defending our national interests. How on earth can United States have national interests in the Middle East or in Afghanistan or in China now? Because they're trying to provoke war in China or this
Not in China,
contained.
with China.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So these iconic moments, as you put them, are really important, not to be forgotten. Someone has to make this chronology of events and lies and all these humanitarian interventions that were launched with pretext, false pretext. And now, to make things even more ironic, they invest a lot of money in my region, in other parts of the world, for making NGOs who would fight against the malicious influence and fake news and disinformation, the ones who lied in front of the entire public. And they are now concerned about fake news from, I don't know, Moscow or Beijing. Or it's really ironic and hard
If
to digest. But
if you put this on Israel, Israel has a military unit. I think it's called 8,200, yeah, which does nothing else.
yeah,
They have a couple of hundred soldiers who do nothing else as distributing, I would say, information warfare. I think that's the best description. Information warfare around the globe.
that's true. That's
And
true.
they
But
do it with military sophistication and precision.
they can actually fabricate anything and present it as testimony from the ground. Uh, the only answer to that is, and it is actually the only way or the main way I inform myself, these various Telegram channels. They're not available everywhere in the world, as far as I know,
Yeah.
but happily they're still available here.
But
No.
the owner of
Oh
Telegram
yes,
was
he was arrested, but it still works. It still works.
it
There
still
are
works.
channels, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
moment by moment, you open the channels and you follow the developments from various parts of the world. That can be conflicting. That can be, with different presentations, but still you are exposed to possibility to measure, to think, to rethink where is the truth, because it's very easy to become an object of some kind of disinformation warfare, as you said. So information are weaponized. So, and there is, even in NATO, if I'm not wrong, there is some kind of cognitive strategy, of cognitive warfare strategy. So they even think about the mind of the people and
Of
how would
course.
they accept the actions or obey or not protest. So that's it. That's it. We are really having problem with a serious leviathan, with lot of mechanisms to influence our lives. And sometimes it looks very, very hard, but that's the only way. Otherwise, we should just uh, accept escapism, close ourselves in our little homes and bubbles, and say, I don't care about the rest of the world.
We have at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, 55 hot wars ongoing right now. Two of them are in the headlines, also mostly in the headlines. Well, I don't know if we can include Yemen, which is kind of related at the moment, but Yemen is now bumped back into the Stone Age by Saudi Arabia already for the last 10 years. So 55 hot wars, 2 of which are in the spotlight. This is Ukraine and that's Gaza. And now, as if that wouldn't be enough and dangerous enough already with the Middle East exploding with Iran, yeah. Now comes China. So as if America would not be involved already in enough wars, they're now aiming at China. Why?
Why? First of all, let me say just a few words about these other ongoing conflicts. Many years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the UN headquarters in New York as a part of a group of intellectuals from former Yugoslavia. It was after September 11th. And we visited various institutions in the United States in order to see how the US policy toward the Balkans, that was at that time the focal point on the headlines everywhere, you know, up to that moment. So how the policy is going to change or not. So that was the reason. And I remember a phrase that was mentioned by an official of the United Nations. He talked about CNN conflicts and non-CNN conflicts. I still keep that in mind because even in that the most universal and the best international organizations we have, it's not ideal. We know it's in collapse, but still, that's the only hope that we have. People there make these clear distinctions that some conflicts are on the spotlight, on the headlines, and they arouse emotions, good, bad, like this or that, taking sides, but there are others that are completely ignored. And some of the people that I've met in the last few months on various occasions, traveling in China and Russia, they put it correctly. Why are we ignored? Are the lives of these people less important? Congo, for example, 6 million people in a, I don't know, short period of time. So that's the reality of it, and it hasn't changed. So now let's get back to your question about China. In this time of total moral decay on a global scale, and I here find the most responsible the intellectuals, the scholars, researchers, everybody who has opportunity to talk or to articulate the things as they are. And many of them decide to keep quiet or to take side of the power holders. There are few who have moral courage and integrity to speak out to the powers. One of them is John Mearsheimer. But I like him. He puts things clearly, bravely. He makes a good analysis up to the moment when you should ask, so what's next? He speaks about this tragedy, global powers tragedy, the realism.
He makes sense to me till he starts to talk about China.
Exactly, that was my point. So, and he even speaks that he's well received in China. He's very popular there. They translated all his books. He goes there. He was recently, I think, some weeks, months ago. So why on earth this man, who is obviously smart and I would say with goodwill, he is not a hawkish person.
He's not hawkish except vis-a-vis China.
Except, yes, when he speaks about that is economic rival. So United States should find some kind of solution with Russia to mitigate this problem. But then our main problem is China. Why on earth? Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. I don't know much about China because I've been there only twice. But I've never seen so peace-oriented society. And you can see that in their internal relations and in their relations with the rest of the world. There is no hegemonic mind. There is, oh, there is economic mind, of course. They probably judge their interest, the development and all that, but they are not trying to impose anything on anybody. Militarily, politically, you're free to do whatever you like, or your people and everything. But let's communicate and let's trade, let's build infrastructure. They're talking about building the world. The Americans are talking about destroying the world. The Chinese people talk about how to make friends out of these, not to say enemies, but not so friendly countries. How to approach them and to try to establish some kind of normal communication, while the United States would constantly trying to portray China as a existential security threat. Existential. Why? If they are all for this global economy, that personally as a leftist, I'm not very fond of capitalism and this neoliberal constellations, but that's the reality. Still, that gives enough opportunity to find the peaceful way to settle conflicts about trade or exchange. But the Americans are afraid of losing their supremacy, and we know the essence of that is the dollar. That dollarization process is what makes them probably panicking in
And
Washington.
Trump was explicit a couple of days ago. He specifically addressed this. They will not do business with any country that will de-dollarize. Makes sense because the petrodollar is the lifeblood of the American way of life. There will be no 11 supercarrier groups without the petrodollar.
Uh, we spoke about these 2 months before Trump gets on power. I'm not very optimistic that we will find ourselves in a new situation, much more positive.
On the contrary,
On the
that's the fear.
contrary,
Yeah.
when you see the list of his nominees for these top
Rubio.
positions, it's
Ouais.
horrible.
Yeah.
It's just enough
Yeah.
to, even if you're an amateur in global politics, it's enough to see their backgrounds and their statements during the campaign or before. So I don't know how we will get out of that mess. But what I hope, my hope is that Mr. Trump and his nominees are probably not quite aware how much the rest of the world has changed. They are aware if India and China make this peace deal over the border conflict during the BRICS summit in Kazan.
Kashmir.
Yeah. So that is a symbolic gesture that shows that even the countries that have problems are aware that there is much bigger problem that they have to resolve together. So
We saw.
if Trump imposes tariffs or doesn't want to make trade with these other countries, he will find his country not great again, but isolated, because these other countries will be somehow enforced to speed up the process that is already ongoing. around BRICS and finding alternatives. They're not very optimistic. It is what I heard in Valdai some days ago. They all know that the dollar is the key instrument of domination still.
But underlying the dollar is the petrodollar. This is a very important concept. The petrodollar means, for people who are not as informed, the petrodollar, of course, means that we, the rest of the world, have to buy dollars, worthless dollars, before we can buy oil. And this construct is crumbling, most and foremost, but not the only one. I mean, coincidentally, both Saddam Hussein and Libya's Gaddafi had one thing in common. They sold their oil against something else than the dollar. And now Russia, China, Iran, etc., and Saudi Arabia now are doing the same. So China, and this is an indication of the change that's already happening, China mediated, how shall I say this, an rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, two arch enemies. They're even doing now, I believe now or next month, is it now already, combined military exercises. Yeah, this is basically unheard of, but it's a definite sign that things are changing.
These are maybe symbolic things or moves that show that these countries are not stupid. And here, when I talk about intelligence and stupidity, sorry if I put it this, I'm not a psychologist or someone who can measure the intelligence IQ of the leading persons, but somehow I believe that on the East, you can find much more reasonable people with ability to think creatively and strategic thinking for the sake of their own good, of their own countries, because they are also patriots. I don't say that they are cosmopolitans and they want, I don't know, to make one big family out of the world. It's in Star Trek possible in the science fiction movies, but not today. But still, there is much more reason, intelligence, and somehow to say thinking two steps ahead before doing anything. So these small steps here and there show that they will probably find some kind of responses to these muscles that Mr. Trump is trying to show even now, when he is not still in the White House. So I believe that they're not going to just give up and say, okay, yes, master, we are going to follow you. There will be, this is a world in some strange form of fermentation, of fragmentation and recomposition. So, I often remember Antonio Gramsci, and not only me, many people refer to the famous statement, the old system is dying, the new is trying to be born. This is a time of monsters. And yes, we are witnessing monstrous things, but still there is some kind of hope that the new is going to prevail, because the alliance of this rest of the world or world majority is much bigger than United States and its allies, even in military terms. We started talking about these long-range missiles, this new wave of military assistance to Ukraine or Israel. The military experts from United States, the ones who are still reasonable, they say that the military industry cannot produce so much as these guys would like to have. So they spend a hell of a lot of money and weapons, which is already in Ukraine or elsewhere. So they are aware of their military weakness. it's showing, I don't want to test it, of course, but I think that at some point they will see that even they're not so mighty as they would like us to think.
I'm just pulling up a little bit of data. So NATO, of course, 32 countries, but it's about 16% of the world population. Whilst we think, I mean, if you believe our media, it's everybody is us, and we share shared values, according to Ursula von der Leyen. So the gross domestic product, GDP, of NATO countries is 45%, whilst the BRICS countries are already on almost 30%. And they have so many prospective members that they
Yes.
stalled now. They halted the new addition of additional members. So this is a serious threat to America. Then what we have here, NATO countries in terms of rest of the world, yeah. So rest of the world, yeah, of course, then 55%. So this small 16% of the world population hold 45% GDP, whilst the rest of the world, also not BRICS, whole of the rest of the world logically then has 55%. But also that is changing.
It
So
is,
the
it
balance
is.
of Western
Yes.
hegemony, which lasted now for what, 300-400 years, is definitely come to an end. So NATO countries, I said 16%, but if I can believe ChatGPT in front of me, it's about 11.8% of the world population. It's a bit less than I said. Yeah, so it's a very small percentage of the world population that we, the West, encompass. So there is a vast universe outside of countries and people who have a different culture and who think different as us, and who not necessarily need to or should even, kind of mirror and mimic the Western neo-capitalist systems.
But the Western neo-capitalist system is, we still remember the big crisis of 2008. And we spoke about this cyclical crisis that
Yeah,
Marx
1929. Yeah,
was
yeah.
talking about, that the capitalism is not going straight forward because it goes up and down, depends on many factors. And now this militarization after the Ukraine war actually is hitting as a boomerang to many of the European leading countries. And what's going on in Germany right now, in
Exactly.
in economic terms, which now reflects on political class and political
Of course,
instability,
they move to the right because
they
of it.
they move to the right. They have less money, more populism, more I don't know, ideas about how to make Germany great again. Or so then see who is who is head of France, a person with 23% of popular support. Macron is done. It's over. The UK is not a part of EU, of course, but let's put it in Europe as such. They are also in a disaster. They have deep internal problems, but they're the most hawkish nation when it comes to Ukraine. And the same applies, let's say, to my country, which is not comparable to these leading European ones. But I'm just giving you a small example on a small territory. The next year's budget is doubling the expenses for military purposes.
Everywhere.
And Macedonia is the poorest country in Europe. So can you see the contradiction? People voted for a government in belief that they will get better life and all these promises that go during the elections. And then when they get on power, they spend more money on military. And Macedonia is not directly endangered by anyone except for being on the part of NATO, and we are a legitimate target to Russians or, whoever thinks that we are part of NATO. So we are risking literally everything, and we are paying NATO with our poverty. We are taking from our children, from our medical system that is crashing down. And I come from a former socialist country where education and healthcare were on a very high level, very free of charge for everyone. So that was the best part of socialism, if you ask me, including the women's emancipation and equality on that ground. So we lost everything, and we are supporting NATO because we expect security. What security in times of nuclear age? But if the Germans were not, how to say, aware where this was leading, then I cannot blame my Macedonian compatriots for not being aware of that. I remember still when the war started in Ukraine, Olaf Scholz held a speech in front of the Bundestag, and he got standing ovation when he promised that we are going to help Ukraine to invest more money into the military complex and blah, blah. I cannot remember the figure, but he promised a huge amount of money and investment in the military sector. They lost the cheap energy from Russia
It's a whole
quietly
topic. It's a whole
with
topic.
the Nord Stream
Yeah, yeah,
explosion and all that,
yeah,
actually terrorist act, to to
yeah.
to self-defeat actually yourself and to cut off your own possibilities for development. So you lose low cheap energy, you invest more money into the military, you create
You
a social.
sponsor and you sponsor a corrupt government in the Ukraine.
Absolutely. They actually keep it in power, although it lost legitimacy. The term of Zelensky is over from I don't know
He was
when.
actually elected on a peace platform. I mean,
I know, I know.
how ironic is that? People don't realize he was
But
promising peace.
that's true. But the same applies to Donald Trump, because many of the people who voted for him, when they had to choose between two evils, the lesser evil, they knew that the Democrats were hawkish, and they all started these wars, and they said, okay, what's our, he's a sort of I don't know, it sounds funny and stupid, but he was some sort of peace candidate, and many people still believe that he is going to end the war in Ukraine. Of course, it doesn't apply to Gaza and to Israel and China,
He
as we
may
talk.
finish the war in Ukraine, but he may start a war with China.
But I'm not even sure about the Ukraine. It's one thing that you say during the campaign, and then you surround yourselves with these hawkish guys, and I'm not even sure in that. And we don't know what is going to happen in these next 2 months. So what situation he is going to find, and if he is going to try to be the man, the strong man, to make America great again, even abroad, and not to show weakness in front of Putin. I don't know how it is going to end, but many unknowns.
On that note, Biljana, you were very generous with your time. Is there any topic that's close to your heart that we did not discuss?
Oh, actually, one of the topics that concerns everything that we talked about, and I am grateful for the opportunity, of course, because there are not many. It is the canceling of every critical voices. It is up to now, we at the university, in academia, generally, regardless of the country, we felt, protected. We have this secret autonomy of the university, freedom of thought, of writing, of speech, of to be free to teach your students in a way you find the best. But this freedom is simply disappearing because I see militarization even in the academia. As I mentioned at the beginning, I teach peace studies. Actually, I do not teach because I don't have students. All my students go and take the courses in security, in strategy, in things like that, pro NATO. Nobody cares about the peace. At the time when the peace is the most precious thing we can think about. I believe that I'm not lonely. I've heard, and I'm very saddened to hear actually many examples from Estonia to America to
Europe, everywhere. It's
everywhere,
everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
So people lose jobs, as you said about the scarf. I know. I think I read in some newspapers that people in Germany, my colleagues in Germany, would lose job for wearing keffiyeh. So where is the freedom, and where is that brings me not only it is not only about my right to say whatever I think is right, but about showing empathy, solidarity. I grew up in former Yugoslavia. I was a little girl going into elementary school when we were raised in a spirit of empathy and solidarity with the children of Palestine. Sadly so, Palestine was an issue even then. Tito, the leader of then Yugoslavia, was a good friend with Yasser Arafat, and the movement of non-aligned countries that was also some kind of predecessor of BRICS today, let's put it that way. So as little children, we would have one day in the month or the week when we would bring small coins, small change from home, symbolically, to collect money for the children in Palestine, or Eritrea, or wherever there was some kind of misfortune, war, or so. We grew up with that idea that we are part of a peaceful world, that we should support each other, we should feel empathy with the ones that are less lucky than we are. And now our children, my grandchildren, go to school to sing songs to NATO. We are NATO, and NATO is like a golden award to our nation and things like that. So see the difference. I don't know where we lost our humanity and our ability to really feel empathy with these people who really suffer too long, and not necessarily at all.
Biljana Vankovska. Did I say this right now?
Yes,
Vankovska.
yes.
Yes. It was my pleasure talking to you.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. It really makes a difference. And as said before, if you want to keep up with my work, make sure you subscribe on Substack. In my Substack newsletters, I dig even deeper. I break down tricky ideas, show you practical analytical techniques, and explain how you can use them in your own life. It's free, the link's right below, and I would love for you to join the conversation. Let me know how it's changing the way you look at the world and its people. As always, thanks for your support and see you next time.